And that's been used consistently for the last 50 years or so.
Nick Pope is a Ministry of Defense official, still currently employed at the Ministry of Defense, who headed up the Ministry of Defense's UFO office for investigating this phenomenon for a number of years in the 1990s. I met Mr. Pope when he was still working in that capacity back in 1993. In his testimony, you will learn of incontrovertible evidence of events of massive objects moving at extraordinary speeds on radar, which are not manufactured on this Earth. He will also confirm the Bentwaters case and other extraordinary cases within the United Kingdom and the existence of extensive government files related thereto.
I received somewhere between 200 and 300 UFO reports each year, and my job was to evaluate these to come to a decision about whether there was evidence of any threat to the defence of the United Kingdom. We were left with a hard core of sightings which defied any conventional explanation whatsoever, and these were a bunch of interesting cases involving sightings by military personnel, near misses between UFOs and aircraft, instances where UFOs were tracked on radar, and cases where UFOs were captured on film and video. One of the most significant waves of sighting in Europe took place over Belgium in March of 1990, and on that occasion UFOs were seen by large numbers of people on the ground and tracked on radar, resulting in 2 F-16 fighter interceptors being scrambled. These aircraft then picked up the UFO themselves on their airborne radar, and an intriguing game of cat and mouse played itself out in the skies of Belgium over the next hour or so. On the 30th and 31st of March 1993, a series of UFO encounters took place over Great Britain, the most interesting of which involved an occasion where 2 Air Force bases were actually overflown by a large triangular or diamond-shaped UFO. Now, the 2 establishments involved in this are RAF Cosford and RAF Shawbury. One important fact about the British wave of sightings in March 1993 was that it happened 3 years to the very night after the wave of sightings that rocked the establishment in Belgium and led to the scrambling of F-16s. That, again, was late on the 30th and in the early hours of the 31st of March. I've made no secret of the fact that I believe some of these UFOs may well be of extraterrestrial origin. Now, I know that that's an extraordinary statement for a serving officer in the Ministry of Defence to make, but it is me speaking on the basis of 3 years' official research and investigation. So I don't make these statements lightly, and I don't do so on the basis of a blind leap of faith. I do it on the basis of the data held by the government.
Now, during this next section of the videotape, you will hear from people who have been involved in events where objects of extraterrestrial origin have landed or have crashed or been forced down and which have been retrieved. This is, of course, explosive testimony. It establishes the reality of the phenomenon and also of the fact that we have been studying this phenomenon for years. Many people will think that this is limited to the so-called Roswell event of the 1940s. This could not be further from the truth. In fact, there have been multiple events, at least a couple of dozen events, where objects of extraterrestrial origin have been acquired, have been retrieved, and which have been studied. We think that this is something which is of extreme importance because you cannot consider that covert programs having spent hundreds of billions of dollars over the decades on research and development, so-called reverse engineering or back engineering of extraterrestrial technologies, have not had significant breakthroughs. The testimony will show that in fact we have. That we have had breakthroughs which have trickled out to our society in the form of certain advances in electronics. However, the central breakthrough dealing with the physics of the quantum vacuum space, the so-called zero-point energy phenomenon, as well as the anti-gravity electrogravitic phenomenon, that these technologies have been withheld from our society. Brigadier General Stephen Lubkin is a practicing attorney in North Carolina and a brigadier general in the Army National Guard with the JAG Division. He, as a young man, was assigned to the White House during Eisenhower's period, and also at the Pentagon saw some of the material from the crash of an extraterrestrial vehicle in New Mexico. He also speaks about Eisenhower's knowledge of the subject and his great concern about the fact that there were projects and activities about which he apparently was not being informed.
We were in the basement of the Pentagon, and in those days, that was in 1959, there was a tremendous amount of security there in the base of the Pentagon, and anybody who's worked there knows what I'm talking about. I learned a lot about Project Blue Book. Blue Book was discussed quite openly in the office. Sections of Blue Book were opened for discussion, and then there were other matters as well that were brought to our attention one afternoon when we were just about ready to finish up training. It was about 3:30, maybe 3:45 in the afternoon. Colonel Hollibird brought out a piece of what appeared to be metallic. It was a metallic piece of looked like a yardstick. It had deciphering. It had encryption on it. He did describe them as being symbols of instruction, and that's as far as he would go. But he did infer that the instructions, whatever they might have been, were something that was important enough for the military to keep working on a constant basis. It seemed giant-like when I saw it because it was the first time I'd ever seen anything like this before, and all eyes were just peeled on that particular thing. And when he told us what it was, it was frightening. It was eerie. There, you could have heard a pin drop in the room when it was first mentioned. Well, he said it had been taken from one of the craft that had crashed in New Mexico, and that it had been taken from a box of materials that the military was working on. They didn't use the word reverse engineering at that time, but it was something similar to the reverse engineering that they felt like they needed to work on, and it was going to take years to do this. Extraterrestrial bodies, yes. There were either 3 or 5, and they didn't even know at that point, because some of the information that they had gotten apparently was incomplete. But 3 or 5 stands out in my mind as the number that were taken. One was alive, partially alive at the time that this happened, and I do not know what may have happened to him after that. The findings that were put in there were highly scientific, and they were highly gone over by the people that knew what they wanted to put in there. This information was information that would never get out to to anyone else, but it was designed for the use of particular